Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today. We're going through the webinar today of how to automate your PGP encryption. We will certainly be having question and answer time at the end, but if you do have any questions as we go through the webinar, you can submit those either through the questions or the chat parts of the webinar window. So our agenda this afternoon, we'll start by looking at the free PGP encryption options, and we'll go through the pros and cons of those, just discuss some different aspects and how well they may or may not work. And then from there, we'll go on and look at automating your PGP encryption. Why should you do so? There are many good reasons, but we'll go through and discuss those. And then following on from that, we'll actually look at best practices. We'll establish that it really is a good idea to automate your PGP encryption. And so we'll go through and look at the ways that you might do that the best way possible. Then we'll go and have a look at a real life customer story of someone who went through this. And then we'll have an introduction to GoAnywhere MFT and a live demonstration. And then we can finish up with any questions. My name's John Sims. I'm a senior technical consultant here at Help Systems. I've been in the IT industry for over 35 years now, mostly in the system administration, automation areas. My background is mostly in the Unix world, but in recent years that has broadened quite considerably. And since I first joined Help Systems in 2011, I've been very much focused on automation in general, file transfers, robotic process automation and the like. So I have a lot of experience in these particular areas and some of the things that we're looking at today. So let's look at the pros and cons of free PGP encryption tools. And there's a certain number of them out in the world, including ours. And so let's start with the pros. And what are those pros? Well, the obvious one is it's free. Well, near enough free anyway. Let's just think about that, because yeah, you may download the software for free, but there's inevitably going to be some kind of maintenance costs or something like that involved. So yeah, it may seem to be free, but you will in the end have to put your hand in your pocket to some extent. But at the very least, it's incredibly cheap, if not totally free. And it's also very easy to get up and running. You just basically download it from the net, install it on a PC, and it's ready to go. So that looks very, very tempting. And just get it in, get it running. You can follow it because it does one thing. So you understand encryption, decryption. Hopefully it does signing and verification as well. All fairly straightforward concepts if you know what you're doing. And so you can go in, get it installed, maybe generate some keys, and away you go. So that all sounds really, really good. And it does what you need to do. That's exactly the point. It does the encryption and decryption, maybe manages your keys. That's it. So it sounds really good and it sounds really tempting. But maybe there are some downsides that we really need to think about here. And the first thing is it's all being done locally on somebody's machine. It's not being managed centrally in any way. So this means auditors, managers, and even the admins, they don't really have any visibility. And what we're talking about there is visibility to everything. We don't know what that user is encrypting and decrypting. And we certainly don't know how they're managing their keys. And particularly if they are doing decryption, that means they have private keys. And if they are decrypting documents from external trading partners you have, that means then that they've got a private key that is particularly important. And you have to wonder, do they know how to protect that? Do they understand how important that is? So you've got this big concern of something that's been pushed out to one or more users, and well, managers just don't know what's going on. But then there's also the other aspect. All we're doing is encryption and decryption. And let's face it, those are invariably part of some greater business process. So now it's all manual. So even if that user is doing the entire process, they're doing it manually. Somehow or another, a file is coming to them. They might have to go and copy it. They might have to get it from their email. Who knows? But one way or another, a file comes to them. And then they have to, oh, okay, now I've got that file, I need to decrypt it. Okay, so they go through and do their thing in the tool, and hopefully they, get the decryption right. But then they have to do something else. They have to think, oh, okay, what do I do next? And that may not just be as simple as copy it to another location. There may be decisions to be made. There could be a lot of possibilities. So now it's manual. It's not always such a good idea. And as we're going to be talking about, manual processes are fraught with error. So, you have a human being involved. Mistakes are going to happen by definition. And those mistakes, if you're unlucky, could be very, very costly. You could be things like, if you're encrypting a file, you encrypt the wrong file, or you encrypt the right file, but with the wrong key, and you send it to someone and they can't then decrypt it. It just all adds up. There's errors, time being wasted, frustration. So, we really should be trying to automate that. And with a free tool like, these free PGP encryption tools, automation becomes much, much harder. So that's not a good thing. And then you invariably have a large number of people in your organization having to do this. And so the admins now are having to go out and manage this software on a larger number of machines. And all of a sudden now the time's starting to add up. That's a lot of work for these admins. So you really want to try and avoid that as well. So let's, try and minimize the amount of work that they need to do. And then these users, they need training. And yeah, the software might seem easy to use. That's what we said in the second point of the pros. But users need to be trained about the importance of keys. And again, as I said previously, particularly if they're dealing with private keys, they need to understand that private key is incredibly important. It's the keys to the safe. It's the combination to the safe. It's the PIN to your ATM card, whatever it might be. So you have to really try and teach people that. And, it doesn't always sink in, or again, people just make mistakes. So that's another problem. And then the last one we're going to look at here is viruses. So the user gets a file and they're very careful, they're diligent, they do all the right things, but through no fault of the user, that file might have a virus in it, and they get the file and they dutifully decrypt it. Bang, you've got an encrypted file on a machine somewhere on your network, and that's going to be somebody's PC, and they're probably not putting that file somewhere fairly neutral. It's somewhere kind of volatile. So when these files come in, you really need to be able to scan them as soon as they're decrypted. Kind of difficult to do in this situation where you've got this all being done out on users' laptops. So we really want to discourage that. So superficially, it might look like these tools are a good idea, but maybe that's not always the case. So while we're talking about these free tools, let's have a look at the free tool that we here at Help Systems provide, the GoAnywhere OpenPGP Studio. And it's very, very straightforward and easy to use, as these tools typically are. It does the encryption, decryption, signing, and verifying. You can create key rings. You can create key pairs in here. You can import and export existing keys and the like. So, it's great and very, very simple to use. It does all the things you need. You might think, okay, yeah, that's great. I'd like to make use of that. And sure, if that is something that's going to be useful for you, we're happy to provide it for you. And we'll even go through just a few tips here. And there's the first tip I'll share with you on using the GoAnywhere OpenPGP Studio is keyboard shortcuts. So there are a lot of people out there, the likes of me included, we can't be bothered to move our hand over to the mouse. We do everything through the keyboard. And so, yes, there are certainly some keyboard shortcuts available, but they're mostly from that task menu. If you right-click a file over there on the right-hand side, bring up the context menu, you don't really get that kind of keyboard shortcut there. So you do have the option there from that main task menu. And then you can also make use of the OpenPGP Studio as a kind of, if you will, key repository, or at least have it working with some kind of centralized key storage. So you can have people maybe generating keys. You can then certainly have them referencing keys that are off, and as you see there in the example, they're off in a secured location. So only the people who are using a tool like this can then access that location. So using the operating system, you can lock down those locations and files where those key rings are stored. So that's not bad. And when you're generating keys there, you can even see, you can control the algorithms as well within them. And so this way, then you can at least have these people all sharing some keys. And that's a kind of an improvement. But still it takes a lot of work on the part of the admin. And then whenever there's a change of keys, it's just a lot of overhead and things that you really don't want to get involved with. So certainly a way to do that centralized key storage, but as we'll see when we look at GoAnywhere MFT, it does it even better. And then the final tip I'll give you about this is the ability to do multiple files. And so you can't necessarily select multiple files on the right-hand side, but if you go to the left-hand side and select the parent folder, then go to the right-hand side and select the context menu for the folder that you're interested in, then you can do all of the files in that folder, and it allows you to do it all in one operation. So sometimes it seems like, oh, hang on, how am I going to be able to do that? I've got a few of these things to do. There are ways, it's just a matter of knowing the correct path. So the GoAnywhere OpenPGP Studio, it does a lot of really good things for you. You can see there's the free download link, and we can always provide you with that later on as well. And so if this is something that you think might be useful to you, then certainly, yeah, we're happy to make it available, no problem at all. Okay, so let's move on and think about why are we actually wanting to automate our PGP encryption. Let's sort of think about this. Well, I've been talking about manual processes, and I was talking about human beings, and of course that brings in errors, and we're going to talk about that a lot as we go through here, but it also takes time. A human being has to, be sent a file. They have to react to that, so that always takes a while, and they have to go through, start up the application, run the application, decrypt the file, look at the file, maybe think about what else do I need to do here? Hang on, I've got to copy it here, and I've got to extract something and then email it to somewhere else, whatever that might be. It takes a while. And these days, more and more, it becomes really, really important that we get things done as quickly and efficiently as possible. And so what we're looking to do here is get rid of the manual process. There's all sorts of security concerns in there as well, because a lot of these files are sensitive. That's the very reason we're encrypting them. And yet now we're letting human beings have access to them, and even worse, have access to the decrypted version of them. And maybe their position warrants that, position in your company warrants that, maybe not. Are they trustworthy? You don't really know, do you? So you want to think about that. Let's take the people out of it. Let's get the manual processes out of it. And as we see there, it speeds things up, time savings, and time is money. There's that old adage. And so one way or another, you end up saving money. So that's always a good thing. But also, really, encryption and decryption, as we're seeing, it's almost certainly part of a greater file transfer. If you're bothering to encrypt the file, it's almost certain the file's being copied around. And so the greater business process that you're looking at isn't just encrypting the file, it's encrypting and decrypting the file. It's moving it from A to B and maybe to C and manipulating it somewhere else. So now we've got this greater process. And let's face it, in any environment, you really want your file transfers all being centralized, all being managed in a single place with a tool like GoAnywhere MFT, of course. So what we really want to do is, by automating your encryption, you're ultimately automating your entire business process, which, as we just discussed, leads to time benefits and therefore cost savings. Not to speak of taking out the security risks of human involvement, and then just the general risk of people making mistakes, either way. So really what we want to do is take that PGP encryption and centralize things. And with these time and cost savings, of course, then we can actually do more of it. By making things happen more promptly, more quickly, then we can deal with larger volumes of data. And then the staff don't have to do all of the manual work. Security again, time savings again. Let the computer do all the hard work and the people do the analysis work that people can actually do. And finally, you don't have to teach employees the proper processes. You don't have to teach them to look out for their keys. You don't have to teach them when a given file comes in and decrypt it, they have to go through certain processes to make sure that that data doesn't get leaked out in any way. And we're making sure that people don't make mistakes. It's these same things that we're going through over and over again, preventing human errors and preventing people consciously doing the wrong things. In other words, effectively stealing. So these are reasons we really want to think, yeah, let's take our PGP encryption, let's make it part of the greater process that it really is. And let's face it, it is, and let's automate all of that for all of these reasons. Okay, so let's come here and let's look at some best practices for PGP automation. So we're moving on and we're saying, yeah, PGP automation is a good idea. So what are the best practices? And the first thing is, you're going to create key pairs. By definition, that's what PGP is. It's all about having those keys. They're the critical part of it all. But it's important that you keep them secure. And so, yeah, you have to give away your public keys. That's normal, that's expected, that's the right thing. But your private keys, they really need to remain private. That's the point. They should be locked away. As few as people as possible should even know about their existence, much less know where they are, to whom they apply, all of that kind of good stuff. Because let's think about it. If something happens and your private key ends up in the world, it becomes a very long process, and there's a window there where you are in danger of being exposed. All of a sudden now people can be intercepting documents from your trading partners and decrypting them, because now they have your private key. So you have to go through the process of generating new keys, distributing to all of the relevant people, all of the public keys, as well as, you know, whatever else may be attached to it. It's a lot of work, and you just really don't want to go there. So it's really, really important you protect those keys. And so in this situation with GoAnywhere, we can actually do that, because you generate the keys within the key management system, the key vaults as we call them, and then they're sitting in there, they're protected. And that way only one or two people knows what's going on, knows where they are, everything's protected. And so you're really looking to do that. And then finally, the public keys can be exported so that people can share them with their trading partners. And now you can set up automatic decryption. And that's where we're going with the second point here. And there are a number of different things we could look at here. You know, if we think in GoAnywhere terms, a trading partner connects in and uploads a file to us using a GoAnywhere MFT trigger. The process starts immediately the file is uploaded. We take that file, we decrypt it immediately. We can virus scan it, make sure that it's safe before then sending it on to the appropriate destinations for whatever processing that might be. Or it could even be a human saying, well, I've received this form. It's part of a manual process, and sometimes that's okay, but that person needs to decrypt that file. You still want to keep that private key safe. So what you could do using either a GoAnywhere secure folder or a form, either is a possibility here. The end user from your site then just says, I've received this file, and they either drag their newly received encrypted file into a folder, or they submit it via a form. Once again, a trigger happens within GoAnywhere MFT, the file is decrypted, checked, and only when it has been proven to be safe and appropriate can it be made available to your end user. So it's giving you that kind of way of even automating a manual process, because now you don't need that keys stored out in some location and people with their own decryption tool. You've set them up, that's something too easy to use. And let's face it, everyone can figure out drag and drop. And so that's what we're really looking to go with here, is give people something that they just use. They don't need to be trained on. They don't need to have software installed on their PC. They've got a browser. That's all they need to do. So that's really, really a big plus from going with this kind of approach. Really, really take everything away from the end user and just give them what they need, which is a facility, not a tool and a key. And of course, everything should be logged, everything. Whenever a key is changed, whenever anything about a key is modified, that should be recorded. Whenever an administrator does anything much more than look at a key, it should be logged. And whenever that key is used, decryption, encryption, whatever, signing, verification, it doesn't really matter. All of these things, all of these actions need to be logged. That way, the auditors can come in and make sure that everything that is being done is correct and that there's no inappropriate decryption. So this way, if someone ends up with a file that they shouldn't, they think, oh, I'm going to decrypt that and have a look at that. That'll be interesting. They may or may not be able to do that, but even if they do, if something goes horribly wrong inside your organization, it's recorded that they decrypted that file. And at some point, someone's going to go through and audit that and go, hang on, that guy just decrypted, they shouldn't have that file. No, and action can be taken. And then, as I've been saying, of course, as part of this, you have now all of a sudden these processes. So even for the simple act of decryption, you know, it's not just decrypting a file, there's more to it than that. There's making sure it goes to the right place, and there's making sure that it doesn't have any viruses, or making sure that the file doesn't contain any sensitive data that users shouldn't be seeing. You know, whether it's tax file numbers or in America, you know, a social security number, all of these sort of things, you know, using some kind of ICAP server, you can check for all of this and make sure people are seeing what they need to, but once again, making sure there's no viruses. And we're also looking to make sure that they're not seeing data that is inappropriate. Again, we're trying to protect the company by allowing people to do what they need to, but nothing more, giving them only what they need. Okay, so let's have a look here. This is just a little case study of one particular customer we have, Cebu Pacific. So they're one of the large air carriers in the Philippines, and they're generally a low-cost carrier. And as you can see there, you know, they're doing a lot of good work. And they came to us and they simply said that they receive from a trading partner a CSV file, and that CSV file needs to be encrypted while it's in transport. Okay, fair enough, not a problem. And then when the file has been received, they wanted to decrypt it. Okay, that's good. And the users were making use of our OpenPGP Studio. So that's really good. We're happy with that. But at some point then they started to realize some of the points that we've just been talking about. In other words, that decryption, you know, that's really kind of part of a greater process. Now, it's a file transfer process. These people are encrypting a file to send it to Cebu, who can then decrypt it and do whatever is necessary. And okay, so yeah, all right, we've got a file transfer. We need to look beyond just encryption. And so naturally, we're going from OpenPGP Studio into GoAnywhere MFT, because GoAnywhere MFT incorporates the encryption and decryption functionality. So we needed to build upon that and think, okay, yeah, let's take that file now and do all of this work inside GoAnywhere MFT. So now that file transfer was being managed that way. It doesn't matter if it was SFTP or secure folders, you know, the file could be transferred manually, automatically, in a lot of different ways. GoAnywhere supports all of that. But now, of course, there's a managed file transfer tool within Cebu Pacific, and we've got these other file transfers. Now you're getting the benefit of the centralization. All of your file transfers are being managed in one place, and that's certainly something we're really looking to do. And so now they're making use of GoAnywhere MFT's workflows and automation for a whole variety of things. And it all started with encryption and decryption. And just because they started to look and realize, and they were curious, they came up with a better solution. So this is exactly the case for automating PGP. Okay, so now we're going to move off and have an introduction to GoAnywhere MFT for those of you who are not familiar with it, and then we'll go into a live demonstration of the product and particularly the relevant items that we're looking at here. But first, a couple of slides of an introductory nature. And so why would you even use a managed file transfer product? Well, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, more and more these days, security is becoming a serious issue, not just even for the CIO, but the CEO. Year after year now, more and more data is exchanged between companies. It's just a fact. However that's happening, there's more and more data moving around. Business is growing, and then the interaction between companies is increasing. So all of this data has been moving around. And it's really important that that data is transferred in a secure and controlled manner. And the product underlying all of this has to stay current. It must stay compliant with all of the various cipher suites, algorithms, standards, and it has to maintain the confidentiality of indeed your data and everybody else's data, whatever that data may be. You know, it could be, you know, the number of transactions that you've been working on over the last month, but it also is the, you know, what we might arguably call metadata, people's usernames and passwords, credit card numbers, all of that kind of good stuff. So it's really critical when this data is being moved around, and that's what we're looking at here, we've got to protect it while it's being moved around. Sadly, in this world, there are more and more breaches. You know, we read about them regularly in the news all the time. You know, things are happening, data hacking is happening, and it's really important that we've got to try and take as much control as we possibly can so that when the data is going from A to B, it's intended to, it needs to, we've got to make sure that it is arriving safe and sound. And this all needs to be done in a centralized manner. So all of your file transfers are happening in one place. It's all about auditing at this point now. Auditors are always there and everything has to be logged in that one place. So certainly looking to take charge of that, and by having it in a centralized site and a centralized application, all of the admin, all of the logging, all of the auditing, it's happening in that one place. That way you can go to the auditors and say, look, there's all the information. You can see it all there. Everything is there. And because GoAnywhere does such a great job of logging everything, they can rest assured that they're getting all of the information they need. But it's all sorts of things. It's people making administrative changes. And now we've got to really be able to trace what's been going on here. You know, who's connecting in? You know, who's making changes? What's happening? Everything that's happening as part of your environment, whether it's administrators doing their job legitimately or otherwise, files moving around, all of this has to be in there, and you have to be able to keep an eye on this. You have to have the log files, and you have to have things like role-based administration to make sure that people are doing their job but nothing else. And finally, again, I'm going to keep talking about this, taking the human error out by automating it. Human error is going to be almost certainly the biggest cause of your problem, and you've really just have to make sure that by automating everything, you're taking human error out of the loop. So now if we have a look at GoAnywhere MFT, you know, here's an introduction to it. It's a modern solution. We're constantly developing it. You know, our development team is really pushing an aggressive target, 4 releases a year. That's what they're aiming for. So we're always looking to stay as current as we possibly can. And GoAnywhere is designed to be easy to use. You know, all the other products, you know, you see a lot of them out there, and it's almost like they've been designed to encourage professional services so they can sell their resources time. And whereas GoAnywhere is meant to be easy to use, it's drag and drop, it's straightforward, and certainly it makes life very simple for the file transfer administrator at your site to be able to say, I'm just going to set this up, done. Plus, it's very easy from an administrative point of view. Upgrades, no problem at all. You know, 15 minutes downtime, a whole cluster is done. Speaking of clusters, even managing those things, it's all incredibly straightforward. And then it's a cross-platform product. It's Java. So we're not getting into the operating system. Java's doing all of that work for us, which means the product is consistent, whatever platform it's on. Even to the point, you know, you might have it installed on one particular platform, maybe even the i-series, and it's running well for you there and it's doing well, but you're moving away from the i-series perhaps. You need to put it on Linux or Windows. No problem. You can easily pick it up, put it down. GoAnywhere doesn't change. It's the same product. So you don't even have to think about that. It gives you incredible flexibility. And then the extensibility of the product is also wonderful, simply because you might start out only using a subset. Maybe you're only using GoAnywhere's SFTP server, but then your needs change. You can say, well, actually, yeah, I need some of these other things. I need that secure folders functionality now. It's all there, it's in the product, just a quick change to the licensing and away you go. So you don't ever have to worry about, oh, that's going to be complex, I've got to reinstall, I've got to do all sorts of stuff. No, And then our perpetual licensing model means you're never worried about the number of users accounts or the number of file transfers or the size of your file transfers. It really, really gives you a great sense of comfort that we're never complicating your life. You can just install the product, use it, and then whenever you need some extra functionality, no software change, quick license change, and away you go. So moving on, and just some of the things that GoAnywhere can talk to, because in a managed file transfer environment, GoAnywhere needs to talk potentially to a lot of different things. And I'm not going to talk to every one of those points. You can read that far more quickly than I can talk about them. But the obvious ones are things like file systems. So, we talk to local file systems, standard network shares, or we talk to S3 buckets, Azure blobs. We can talk to different data sources, whatever they might be. We can talk to messaging servers. Then, of course, all of your standard file transfer protocols as well, and web services. So all of these things, all of the different ways that you expect to be able to transfer data with your trading partners, all of those protocols, they all talk these same protocols. It's not a problem. Nobody's going to look at you and go, oh, what's SFTP? We support all of these things. So we're really keeping up with the standards, and as the standards evolve, we keep up with them as well. But going a little bit beyond that even, we talk all of those standard protocols, but there's a lot more of these things that are now software as a service sort of situations. You can, again, see some examples there. And so that's what we call cloud connectors. And these are part of the product. And this is another situation where our development team is just churning these things out. And it's wonderful. There's always new options coming up in our online marketplace, as you can see there in the bottom right. So you can connect out to these things and exchange data with SharePoint, Salesforce, or whatever it might be, work with Box or different AWS facilities. And there's a lot of them that we support now. So you've got other ways to move data around. Again, it's all industry standard stuff. These are all things that your trading partners are working with as well. You can now talk to them with GoAnywhere. And in the off chance that our cloud connector for your particular requirement hasn't been created yet, you can build your own. We'll help you. We have the documentation. It too is done with a drag and drop interface, very much like our project designer that we'll be seeing in the demonstration shortly. So very, very simple way for you to put together your own cloud connectors. So if you've got some service, you can certainly work with that. And then also GoAnywhere allows people to connect into you. So, we might have all of our automated projects set up within GoAnywhere, and they're working away, and GoAnywhere's internal schedule might be doing its work, and our monitors and triggers doing their work. But it could be as well that you have, say, an enterprise batch scheduler. It's your main corporate enterprise batch scheduler, and it does all of your scheduling. And in the name of being consistent with what I was just talking about having things centralized, you say, I want to have all of my scheduling centralized in that place. Okay, that's fine. We have no problem with that. And so your scheduler has a number of different ways for connecting in. For example, we actually have a small free module that allows you command line access from some remote server to connect in to GoAnywhere and perform a variety of functions like, running projects, but also, different administrative functions, web user functions. So from that remote system, your enterprise batch scheduler can kick off these workflows. So you've got your scheduling centralized there and your MFT centralized here in GoAnywhere. That works really well. Or if you don't want to use a command line, you can also connect in using SOAP calls or RESTful API calls. It doesn't really matter. Everything's sent over HTTPS, so it's all nice and secure. And you still have all the power that you would have in GoAnywhere, the ability to do overriding of variables so to make sure that when you run something, you're always giving its correct context, and all of the other management issues that you might have. We can always help you handle those. This way, you're able to connect remotely. So a couple of slides coming up are some of the advantages of GoAnywhere MFT, and you can see there's quite a few. I'm not going to talk to every one of those. About halfway down, inbound services. You may or may not be aware of the fact that GoAnywhere, it doesn't just connect out to people, and it's kind of what I've been talking about up till now. It will connect out to an SFTP server, an HTTPS server, or an S3 bucket, or whatever it might be, Salesforce perhaps in the cloud. But people can connect into GoAnywhere as well with SFTP and FTPS and the like, AS2 even. So if people need to connect to you, if that's an agreed upon thing, GoAnywhere can give you that, still using all of those industry standard protocols. So those services are there. And since we're certainly talking today about PGP, we give you key management. So we have what we call key vaults, which you'll be seeing in the demonstration shortly. You can store all of your keys, and indeed your SSH keys and your SSL certificates in there as well. Store them securely within the GoAnywhere database, and then you can control access to them through the role-based UI that the administrative user interface gives you. So again, people can do their administrative work, but they still may not be able to see those keys. That admin UI is really, really powerful. And that's even the next point, proper role-based security. We provide you with roles, but if you don't like our roles, we also give you the facility to define your own for the entire administrative user interface. Final point on this particular slide, agents, they're like little mini MFTs that can connect in to the main server. And one of the great use cases for this is if you need to have an agent out in a remote location, and that remote location does not allow you to connect in to it. So then the agent in turn connects out from its location back to the central GoAnywhere server. And so that way it gives you that level of control for those situations where you can only connect in one particular direction. Second page of features here, and again, there's a variety of things there. I will talk about secure mail, and then this is a situation where from GoAnywhere, like a template email is sent out, and the recipient just gets this basic email, and then there is a link. So the message and all of the attachments are not there at this stage. And the big plus here is that message is never left sitting on an email server. And let's face it, email servers are not secure places. So you really want to try and take them out of the loop. So instead, we just send this template email, and that's all that's ever left sitting out there. And it has a link in there. And that link is protected to a number of levels depending upon what you require. And so that way, when the recipient clicks that link, they maybe do the authentication that you require, and only then do they get to see the email and the attachments. With the added bonus as well, any really large attachments now never get rejected by an email server because they go directly from the GoAnywhere server to the recipient via HTTPS. So the file's being transported in a secure manner, but secure mail gives you a lot of flexibility there. We have different two-factor authentication methods, whether it's things like SSH keys or using certificates, using radius two-factor authentication or time-based one-time passwords, Google Auth, a whole lot of possibilities in there. And the other thing I am going to talk about on this slide is the GoAnywhere Gateway. And this really, really applies when we are talking about you acting as a server. So if you think about it, you have your trading partner here at the bottom, and they connect in to you, and you want them to connect into your GoAnywhere, and you want that GoAnywhere in your private network. You don't want it sitting in the DMZ because DMZs are by definition high risk, and so you don't want that. So by using the GoAnywhere Gateway, which is just a piece of software, it runs on Linux and Windows, whatever, so it'll sit on whatever box in your DMZ. What it allows you to do is keep this internal firewall completely closed for inbound connections. So no inbound connections are ever opened up that way, because instead, GoAnywhere safely here in its private network connects out to the gateway and tells it what to do. Nothing is stored here in the DMZ on the gateway. Whenever the gateway has to make a decision, it uses that connection back to GoAnywhere and says, do I let this guy in or not? GoAnywhere makes all of the decisions. All of the data is stored in your private network. All this guy is doing is acting, it's just a pass-through. So whenever anything comes in from the outside world, the gateway asks for GoAnywhere, do I let him in or not? And if so, a second channel is established, yes, again, going outbound through here. And that is, in effect, linked up by the gateway, and it just passes things back and forth now between GoAnywhere on your private network and your trading partner in the outside world. So if people are connecting into your GoAnywhere server, I really, really strongly recommend you think about this gateway, because that reverse proxy functionality, it gives you the protection of locking down this firewall, and then being able to have your MFT environment entirely in your private network. So it's a really, really important thing. So really, really want to make sure that you're thinking about that. Final thing before we actually go and look at the software itself. So for most people, finding some sort of credible third-party evaluations, it's really important when you're researching new software. You've got to try and find a comprehensive and honest source of information who can help you decide what really is a good fit for you. And for a long time, this hasn't really been there. The Gartners of this world haven't really gone into this particular space. And there are some file sharing products that kind of call themselves MFT solutions. Many of them don't have any really good security controls or audit trails or the like. So what we really need to do is find someone who's going out into the market and researching this on your behalf. And Infotech Research have just released their 2019 MFT category report. It scores the leading vendors based on customer reviews, and 9 vendors were listed, including Ipswich Move It, Citrix ShareFile, and of course GoAnywhere MFT. And GoAnywhere MFT has had the highest composite satisfaction scores for multiple vendor capabilities, including things like vendor support and ease of data integration, product strategy, and the like. And it also ranks #1 for multiple features like encryption, decryption, performance, and session monitoring. And they're about to release a new version of this report, but apparently we're still #1. So we're looking forward to seeing that come out to the market. And you can find this report for yourself on our website. We have it out there on goanywhere.com/info-tech. You can see the link there. And so certainly that's something that you might want to think about. So finally, let's go and have a look at, oops, one slide too many, GoAnywhere itself. So we'll just spend a few minutes having a look at GoAnywhere MFT. And so here we are, I'm just in a Chrome browser. And as you notice here, I've got 2 tabs. You can even see here when I hover, I'm saying that one's on my laptop and this one's here running on my Unix cluster. And so we're going to make use of both of these. But let's just have a quick look around GoAnywhere MFT. And so, we're going to only look at a certain number of things, but one of the things that does become important is the fact that there are 2 classes of user here. So we don't just have users for MFT, we have administrative users, for example. So that's the user interface that we're looking at here. So that's all managed by role-based security, as I've been talking about, and people can only see the parts of the admin user ID, user interface that you mean them to see. So we're certainly keeping people locked down in here. And then we have what we call web users. Now, these are the people that are connecting in to your MFT services, things like SFTP, HTTPS and like. So these are your trading partners. These are arguably your end users. So even someone who's connecting in through a browser and doing drag and drop, they too are a web user. If we have a quick look at a web user here, and there's a lot of things that you might want to set against a web user, I'm going to focus on a couple of things. All of the different features and the different functionality you can control on a user by user or group basis. And this guy has access to most protocols, although FTPS is turned off, and a lot of other functionality in there. And so each user is completely controlled by you as an administrator. So again, they can only do what they need to do. And then here under folders is even better, because when someone connects in, they see what they perceive to be a folder hierarchy. And that's what we have over here in what we call virtual folders. But what's behind these virtual folders may just be a real folder here on a Windows box, but it also could be a network share. Now, these things are what we call resources, and they're defined over there. I touched on these a little while ago, and I said these are things that GoAnywhere connects to, and that's what we're looking at here. So in this case, when the user uploads something into that quote-unquote folder, it's actually been sent across to this place on this network share. Or that might even be here on an FTP server. Yeah, I know FTP is old and out of date, but this is just something that I still have hanging around, a legacy thing. But what it means, again, is something in theory is being copied to the GoAnywhere server, but in practice, it's finding its way off onto some other server somewhere. It could be an S3 bucket. So somebody connects in and straight away, their files are going to where you actually want them to go. And there's other things we can do, which we're going to be looking at in a moment. So here now, we're kind of in charge of where the users put their files or grab their files, and you can see all the permissions here as well. So that's a really good start. You're locking down people to where they can access. But here, we're here today to talk about PGP encryption. And one of the things you need to think about with encryption is storing your keys. And I've talked about this a couple of times. What we call our key management system, or in other words, key vaults. And there's a number in here. You get to create as many as you like. And so here you can see, okay, I've got this demo one. And over here, you can see the different items that I have in there. And so what I'm going to do is just click on this, and we'll go and look at the PGP keys. And I've only got the one key in here at the moment. And you can look at the name and you think, oh, cluster. But didn't John say he was on his laptop? And yes, John is on his laptop. But this key here is a public key. In other words, I'm going to use this to encrypt files and send them off to my cluster. And when we have a look at the cluster in a few moments, you'll actually see how this all relates together. So now I've got something that I can use to encrypt that file and send it off to that cluster, that other location. But how do we do that? Well, in this situation, I want GoAnywhere to be looking at a folder somewhere, and this is what we call a monitor. GoAnywhere is actually looking at a folder and saying, okay, whenever something arrives in there, I want to do something with that. I'm going to, whatever that might be. So if we have a look at this monitor here, and what it's going to do, we'll have a look at. But here we're monitoring this folder, and we're just looking the file to exist. And I'm just looking for anything in that folder to exist, and I'm monitoring every 15 seconds. Now I've actually got this turned off at the moment, and that will run one of my projects. And I'm going to show you this shortly, and it's going to pass into that project whatever files it finds. So the project will instantly know what the files are that it needs to do something with. And so let's go and have a look at that project. And I've got that in here, and that's the project there. So I'm going to have a look at that. And so here we've got our project designer user interface. And so here are the steps of this project. So I'm going to create a temporary workspace, and I'm going to encrypt the file. So here we go. There's that variable. That's the one that I just got from my monitor. And I'm going to put the encrypted files down into just what we call my workspace, some temporary space that will go away. And here's where I chose that key. There I chose the vault for the key. There's the demo vault. And then here I get to choose the keys. There was only the one, but that's what I'm going to use to encrypt it. And once that's been done, I actually have another variable here that stores that information. And then I'm going to use SFTP to connect to that cluster. There's another resource, and I'm going to put the files, and there's that variable. And I'm then getting another variable created telling me which files are actually transferred. So we can make sure we're know what's happening. And there I'm going to put a message in the log file, and I'm going to copy the original files. So that's that one that was passed in. I'm going to copy that off to an archive, and then delete from the original location, and then clobber my workspace. So that's what's going to happen on this side of the fence. And so what I'm actually going to do, don't need to save anything in there. I'm also going to bring up a window here in a moment, and I'm just going to come in and enable that monitor. So I've just got it disabled at the moment. So there we go. Yep, and now we're just going to wait a few seconds, and somewhere in between 15 and 30 seconds, we'll see these files disappear. So we'll just give that a couple of moments to go through. And these files are actually going to be picked up by that project and transferred off to that remote location. Indeed, while we're waiting for that, I'm also going to show you, here's my Linux. Oh, there are the files, they've gone, that's nice. And now they've just arrived here on my Linux box. So there they are. A couple of seconds ago, they weren't there. I wasn't quite quick enough. So that's all been transferred. And you might be thinking, well, how did that all happen? Well, we start on our side here where we are first, and we can go in here to our logs, and we can see here's under completed jobs. There we go. There's that project. That's the one I was just looking at. It was submitted from a monitor, and there's the time, and here's the job log. We can say that's good. And there's all the log file, and we're talking about public keys, and we're looking up algorithms, and we're encrypting files here. And after that, we're doing SFTP, and that's great. And then we're uploading files and so on, all the way down through, and we're copying files locally and then finally deleting them. So this side of the equation is done. We've done the decryption using the public key. But what happened on the other side? So now, at the moment, we're the trading partner. That's what we are. We've encrypted it and we've sent you the file. Here we are, we've done that and GoAnywhere. So now I'm going to go to the other side. So now here I am, I'm on my Linux cluster, and you can see that up here, and you can even see it over there as well. So what's happened over here? Well, if we come in and we look at the log files, and what we'll see in here is there's the completed jobs, and here we are, there's the date and time stamp, and we're decrypting files in here. And if we see our SFTP server, that's where the files came across. And here we are, files that were just uploaded successfully, and there's a little information about the trigger that actually kicked this off, so I can do that. And there's the trigger log, and there we go. There's the information about the upload successful, and then here we see one of those files being processed. Now back in our completed jobs, there's that job number. I'll show you this project in a moment. So here we are, and so here we're decrypting the files that were sent from that laptop, and we're going through some steps. But I tell you what, let's go and have a look at that. How did we set that all up? And then we'll come back and look at the log file. Well, what we did here now, we used, instead of a monitor, we used a trigger. We've got our SFTP listener set up, and we've got this trigger. And this is processing files that came across by SFTP. And we made sure that it was only from this guy called Jay Sims and only from that location. So we're being very specific here because we don't want to treat all files the same. We're going to say that guy from John Sims, we do this. From other people, we do different things. And then in the end, we call this project and we pass in the files that we were given. And then in the project, we come in here. Here we go into our project designer again. And so once again, I create a workspace, and then here I do the decrypt this time. So again, like everything else, I came here and I did the drag and drop. And so I'm saying encrypted files, that came in from the trigger. That was what was specified in the trigger. And I decrypt those files just into the workspace, because at the moment, I don't know if those files are trustworthy. I really don't. So I've got to take them and decrypt them, but I'm just going to put them in this temporary workspace for now. And I'm going to have my file name stored in here, because now I've got my scanning turned off at the moment. But this is what you would normally do. You would call an ICAP server, and you would take those decrypted files and you would run it through an ICAP server. And you would look for any errors from the ICAP server. And if you found things that you didn't like, in other words, if it's not 204, you would log the errors and take some kind of action. That's what you would do. Like I say, I have that turned off at the moment. So I'm just decrypting the files. And so here I decrypt them into my workspace. And so then from there, I'm going to copy them from my workspace into a final destination. And indeed that path corresponds to that path. You can even see there the name corresponds. So I've just put them in there. If I were doing no virus scanning, if I weren't, I could have decrypted them straight into there. No problem at all. Then after doing that, I copy them. I then just create a log file empty. There are the decrypted files. I delete the encrypted files here, again, just making use of my variables, and then tidy up my workspace. So basically now you've got to see both sides of the equation here. You've got to see how GoAnywhere, coming back to the other tab, GoAnywhere saw a file come from somewhere and say, oh, I'm going to pick that up, I'm going to encrypt it, and I'm going to send it off to my trading partner. And that's what we did. So we encrypted it and we sent it off via SFTP. Then we came to the other side now, and now we're actually saying, great, someone's going to connect into our GoAnywhere SFTP server. So we're going to make use of one of our triggers. And then that trigger will call this project, which will decrypt the file, scan it, log things, copy the file to different locations, delete, and do whatever else it might be that you need. So very much here, we're saying, okay, good, GoAnywhere can cover both sides of it. But what we're doing here is we're automating all of the process. We're taking PGP and saying, yeah, PGP is important. We're going to encrypt and decrypt, but we're looking at that as part of a greater process, and we're automating it. So when we come back to the very beginning of this process, and we have, coming back here, that monitor, and we have this monitor here, this file that I was monitoring for, actually I can turn that off, but these files that I'm monitoring for here, and in fact I could be monitoring any of these conditions really. I just happen to be using file exists. I can be monitoring for that, and that could be coming from some application. So again, we're taking people out of things here. As soon as that file's ready, GoAnywhere will pick it up, it will encrypt it, it will move it on. Someone on the other side, as soon as they receive it, they decrypt it, they check it, and then they do things with it. So you're taking human beings out of the whole process, which is really, really important. You're making sure that things happen quickly, saving you time, saving you money, and by removing human beings, you're removing errors and you're removing possible theft. Okay, and so with that, I am going to just take you back to the last couple of slides and say thank you very much. We're coming up to the end of our time in a couple of minutes here. So as you can see here, we've got all sorts of ways we can help you. We're always happy to take questions. Whatever it is, we would love to help you. We would like to get you started with that GoAnywhere, help you get it installed maybe, be there to assist, answer your questions, and take all of your automation and get it installed in GoAnywhere, PGP, file movements, and everything. So we're just about out of time, so unfortunately, we don't really have time for any questions. I'm just going to come in here and just make sure. Fortunately, there don't seem to be any questions that I need to address. If you have any questions after this, of course, we would be happy to answer them for you. So using any of those methods that you can see there, please don't hesitate to ask us, and we'll get those questions addressed for you. Other than that, I'm going to say thank you very, very much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking this hour out of your day to come and listen to me speak. I hope this has been useful to you. And I look forward to speaking to you at some point in the future whenever you have needs to automate your PGP or indeed any other operations to do with file transfer. Again, thank you all very much for your time, and bye-bye for now.